Hey YouTube, right here. I got into a conversation on Twitter today, and we ended up going to personal message for it because it ended up becoming a pretty nuanced thing, and we were both actually trying to have a full-fledged discussion. And the whole 140 characters limit thing, well, it just doesn't work out. But we were actually discussing Nintendo. Now, me and this person, we're both Nintendo fans. Although neither one of us is really a fanboy or anything like that. Like, we're more than willing to criticize Nintendo for bad behavior. But the thing is he ended up bringing up, big YouTubers and Let's Players, streamers, so on and so forth, complaining about Nintendo thinking that they have a right to a cut of their money. And, well, we ended up having a pretty long discussion about it. And I mean, I'll admit that Nintendo, the games themselves, like the characters, the representations, so on and so forth, yada yada yada, yeah, that's their intellectual property. However, when the topic of fair use comes up, people all of a sudden tend to give Nintendo a special pass on it. And I don't understand that. Like, if EA was to do anything like what Nintendo's doing, these same people who are defending Nintendo would be throwing EA under the bus. If Activision was to do it, they'd throw the person under the bus. If Konami did it, they'd throw them under the bus. But because it's Nintendo, for some reason, they all of a sudden say, oh, well, they can go ahead and do it. No, actually, the thing is the only reason why they can do it at this point is because of the fact that the people that they're doing it to don't have the money for the massive court costs that it would take, and the payoff wouldn't be worth it. Fair use means if you have a transformative work, so that can vary, as far as case-by-case basis, but when someone's sitting there and doing a let's play of a game that isn't, heavily story-driven, like Mario is not a heavily story-driven franchise. Let's just be completely honest. If you haven't figured out the story of the game by this point, yeah, either you haven't been playing the games at all, or you're particularly slow and you're probably not interested in the nuance of this conversation. So why should... And Mario Party, another example. Why? That's not narrative driven at all, period. So that argument falls flat on a lot of these games. And I mean, these people bought the game, right? They're playing the game, they're adding their commentary to it. Typically intros and outros, they're putting it up on their personally created channels. What does it take to consider something transformative? That's the real question. And the sad part is that it is actually a question. There are no even basic guidelines, really, as far as that goes. At least as far as I'm aware. I'm not a copyright legal expert or anything like that. But I know that you know, fair use covers use of copyrighted materials for satire and so on and so forth. So why is it that people can't show gameplay? You know, why is it that Nintendo suddenly gets to make money off of someone else's effort? And that's where it comes in. And people say, well, those people are making money off of Nintendo's effort. Yeah, but they paid Nintendo already. They bought the fucking game. So Nintendo's made its money. And the thing is unless it's a buggy POS game, which Nintendo doesn't typically put out. Most of Nintendo games are pretty well locked down. So at that point, they're getting advertising. If the person's on there having fun, then why are you going to shut that down? What, because you didn't get the extra couple of pennies? Really? I mean, especially with big YouTubers. And the fact that the automated system, and this is where it really becomes a problem, the automated system on YouTube, in particular, will sit there and flag people for having Nintendo content in there. I mean, Nintendo flags pretty much everything in its content. So if they go ahead and they show a snippet of gameplay, or have Nintendo sound in their video, even if it's them being critical of the product, Nintendo will flag that. And that's a big problem. I mean, I think they've been trying to address that, because that's one of the major arguments against Nintendo at this point. It's really making Nintendo look draconian. And I'm going to be honest, I'm one of those people, even though I'm a fan of Nintendo, they are draconian as far as this goes. They're very ass backwards. Don't get me wrong, I love Nintendo's games, I love what they do for the industry, but I absolutely hate their practices. And the thing is when you become a major business like Nintendo, you have to learn to take criticism. You have to learn that not every last thing is going to go your way. And you have to learn that there is such a thing as fair use, that people are allowed to use your material for review purposes, for satirical purposes, and yes, even Let's Plays. As long as it's not a story-driven thing. I'm pretty sure a lot of judges would sit there and go, well, I mean, if it's a thing where the people are there for the story more than anything else, and they're showing this story, it is devaluing the product, at which point, okay, I understand that. But like I said, with things like Mario Party, or Mario Maker, or something like that, there's no excuse. At that point, that's just Nintendo wanting to make money off of people who have already paid them money. Off of those people's effort. And with the way that the YouTube system is set up, they get to take all of the money. They don't get their fair cut, quote unquote. They get all of it. And that's a big issue. And YouTube's got an even bigger problem, just completely underlying. And that is with the copyright system in general. Because you see, with the DMCA, they have to take down the video or else they're putting their neck out. Okay, understandable. But the thing is, as soon as the other person challenges it, it's then up to the person who filed the DMCA initially to elevate it to the courts. But with a copyright, that doesn't happen. What they do is they say, hey, this is copyrighted. And then the person whose video it is has to contact the person who copyrighted, who put the copyright claim in, saying, hey, no, here's the reason why you are not entitled to this. And then it's up to the person who initially filed the claim. And if the person whose video it is wants that video back, wants control of that video back again, other than deleting it, they then have to eat the legal costs of it. That's kind of like sitting there and saying, all right, I went and bought this TV from the store. The person who came and installed it, got a good look at the layout of my house, came into my house and took the television. You then go ahead, report it to the police. The person says, no, this is my TV. And the police go, well, if you want to go ahead and prosecute this one, you have to pay for all of the detectives' salaries. You have to pay for the DA salary to file the charges against this person, and you have to pay the prosecution attorney. That's basically what's going on here. Because the thing is the copyright claimant there doesn't have to prove anything. They don't have to prove a damn thing. They can just come in, swoop in, boom. Now that's a big problem in and of itself, and it leads to people like Jim Sterling who sit there and exploit the copyright system to deadlock it, so that way you've got multiple people claiming a copyright on something, and so the money goes nowhere. The money doesn't go to anyone. The video cannot be monetized at that point. Now that's fine for Jim Sterling because he doesn't rely on YouTube for his livelihood. However, a professional YouTuber, of course, does. And if they get caught in this, not only can they go ahead and get strikes against them, if the copyright claimant decides that, no, they're not going to listen to this person, even if the person has absolute rights to the claim, they're all like, no, I have all of these things here. It's all like, I made an hour-long video and I used a 5-second snippet of something that you have a copyright claim on. That does not mean you get to claim my entire video. And the problem is the only way for this to be solved is for Google and YouTube to step up and tell these people, no, if you're going to go ahead and do this, we're going to personally review. But they're not going to do that because they're not willing to hire the people needed, hire the manpower needed for them to actually go through and make and review all of these claims, because there's so many of them. And they know that a lot of them are fraudulent. There's no way that they don't know, unless they've just been putting their fingers in their ears and not listening to anyone. But we already know that they're listening because they're sitting there making every excuse in the book. This comes down to sheer laziness. And I've noticed this about a lot of major companies. They are being lazy. They're being cheapskates. They're not willing to put in the effort to maintain their business. They're expecting other people to maintain their businesses for them. Can't say that about Nintendo since they make their own games. But the thing is they're even wanting other people's work to profit them, with them putting no effort into it. In fact, them initially making money to begin with. And they think that they deserve more. And I'm sorry, Nintendo, but that isn't how it works. And all it is at this point is a deterrent for people to promote their products. Because even if someone's speaking glowing reviews about Nintendo products, if they're not part of the Nintendo Partner Program, which, I mean, come on, at this point, that's basically Nintendo going, nice business you have there. Shame if something was to happen to it. And this is coming from an Italian. I know what that looks like. And it is what it looks like. This is Nintendo abusing the system. They are abusing their position of power as far as their monetary level versus the YouTubers and other content creators from other sites. They are being cowards at this point. And quite frankly, I can't wait until someone says, you know what, cost be damned, I'm taking these fuckers to court. I cannot wait for it. When that does happen, I will be grinning ear to ear when Nintendo gets its ass handed to it in court. Just hopefully the person that does it has the smarts in their counterclaim to go ahead and put in cost of legal fees. So that way Nintendo not only has to pay their own legal fees, but they also have to pay the expenditure incurred by the party who was actually having to take them to court over a fraudulent claim to begin with. Now, I'm not a lawyer, but the thing is I've heard of people suing for cost of legal fees. So there is precedent there. And unfortunately for Nintendo, a lot of big YouTubers are in Western societies, and a lot of Western societies have that same view of fair use. And a lot of major reviewers, that at least the ones that I watch, are actually based in the US. And judges are getting really sick and tired of major corporations coming in and terrorizing, you know, smaller businesses and so on and so forth. So, I mean, at least here in the US. And so now we're at the point of all it's going to take is one person actually taking Nintendo to task. And I'm not talking about them going after Nintendo of America. I'm talking about them going after Nintendo of Japan. Actually making them send representatives out here to explain why they are entitled to all of the money from someone else's work, when that person legally bought the product. And a lot of people are like, oh, well, it's trademarking. No. That's a completely different law. You can hold a trademark to something, and someone can go ahead and put something out that looks identical to it. As long as they don't claim that it's your product, your trademark means nothing. Means absolutely jack shit. Trademark law is very specific. Copyright, however, is very general. And I think it's time that we go ahead and actually start pushing for a change. Make it to where copyright is much more specific. I mean, hell, you know, people tried to sit there and copyright certain words. I forget who the asshole was that did it. It was the creator for Candy Crush. Literally tried to copyright Candy, and I believe Saga as well. I might have been another person for Saga, but I know that the person for Candy Crush actually tried to do that. And then you also had the Fine Brothers trying to sit there and trademark React. I believe they also tried to get a copyright for it. So, I mean, that's a big problem. And the fact that the system is that ambiguous about what can and cannot be copyrighted, there's a lot of problems. Fair use was put in so that people could go ahead and give honest reviews. Let's be completely honest. That was the primary thing, because before that, companies were allowed to sit there and say that people were infringing on their copyright when people were giving an actual review of their product to silence those critics. Well, Nintendo has either purposely or inadvertently been doing that. Other companies have been purposely going ahead and doing it. And again, back to Jim Sterling and his lawsuit that's going on. And a lot of people are, keep saying, oh, well, Jim's a piece of shit. I'm not going to disagree with someone on that. I mean, I watch some of his content and I agree with some of the stuff he says, and then I completely disagree with some of the stuff that he says. I completely disagree with his fucking politics, and I disagree with him putting politics into his videos. But that doesn't mean he needs to be silenced. That's the big thing here. If he wants to be a dumbass and sit there and, call a bunch of people that watch his show morons for them having legitimate concerns, then he can go ahead and do that. He can just go ahead and suck it up whenever people stop watching his show or start downvoting every one of his videos and his videos stop trending. That's on him. What's not on him is when people are trying to silence him through the legal system, utilizing it as a weapon. And Nintendo right now, sad to say, is the biggest offender here. Out of all the companies, I mean, I hate EA. I hate Activision. Fuck Konami. But the fact of the matter is Nintendo is the one gaming company that is actually extorting people. Like, outright extorting people. I think it's so funny that Nintendo takes such a big stance against the Yakuza when they act just like them. And people don't understand where I'm actually coming from on that. It's like, guys, they are literally threatening people's channels. They are literally taking their income forcefully by using a crooked and flawed legal system and blocking any change. They're lobbying to block any change to copyright law because they know as soon as changes start to happen, they will suddenly lose that iron grip that they have. They are terrified of it. The music industry, another big one there. And the thing is the music industry, they're even more of piles of shit because, I mean, at least the video game industry, for the most part, pays its employees a fair share. Whereas with the music industry, good God, no. The artists there, I mean, there's a very few amount of artists that actually get a fair share of the sales of their CDs and individual MP3 downloads and so on and so forth, whatever. Name your media. But the fact is you've got 3 major corporation groups that are terrified of change to copyright. One is the music industry. 2 is Hollywood. I understand how Hollywood's terrified of it. But the third one is video gaming. It hasn't learned. And what I mean by it hasn't learned is I remember the video game crash when it happened. I was alive. I was old enough to have memories of when that happened. And the problem is we're looking at another section of that. Except this one's going to be a little bit different. It's going to be major AAAs collapsing in on themselves and indie developers getting to rise to the top. Hopefully that happens relatively soon. I would love to see these AAA companies have to liquidate their assets, have to sell off their IPs, and actually sell their IPs to people who are actually going to do something with them. And that includes Nintendo. I would love to see Nintendo take a nice hard stock hit based off of its shitty practices, just to wake them up, because that's the only way that you're going to wake them up. Talking to them does nothing. They're not willing to listen to anyone. The only thing they're willing to listen to is hard numbers. And the only way for that to happen is for them to stop selling games, to stop selling their hardware. But we're not going to get that because there's a lot of Nintendo fanboys out there. And there's a difference between being a fan and being a fanboy or fangirl, whatever. There's a huge difference between it. Being a fan means not only are you willing to sit there and praise them for the positive things that they do, but you're also willing to issue words of correction for when they screw up. Being a fanboy or a fangirl is excusing the unexcusable, making a big deal out of slight, very, very, very slight positives, and then attacking anyone who says that the game isn't perfect, or the console isn't perfect, or that your precious company isn't perfect. Here's the thing. You don't have a stake in the company, so stop defending the company, because the company does not have your best interest in mind. They have theirs in mind. And when you shut down people telling this company how it's screwing up, calling it out on its bullshit practices, all you're doing is hurting that company and speeding it along to its inevitable destruction. Because the fanboys and fangirls, as numerous as they may be, are not enough to keep these companies afloat. These companies have gotten way too large. And that company will sink if you are the only people buying their product. So it's very rare for me to say this, but fanboys and fangirls, it's time for you to sit down, shut up, and let the adults talk.